engineering and sociology, and he's currently, or he will soon be pursuing his master's degree in data science as well. And in addition to his education, he's currently a product manager at New Relic and also the founder of Stealth Startup. And Ismail has taught hundreds of students as an instructor of something called decals at UC Berkeley, which are student-led courses. A number of students at Berkeley and some within our community have taken classes from him and have learned amazing uh, tips and tricks and stories from his many accomplishments. And these courses were on entrepreneurship and product management. And inshallah, I'll let Ismail take the floor to give us strategies on how best to communicate with executives to help achieve our career goals.
Awesome. Yep, I see Manal. She's here, and she actually was one of my students. So great to see you. Hopefully, hopefully you think the presentation is exciting, Manal. I know maybe some of the material I'll be sharing you've probably already seen, but never too always good to get a refresher, I guess. Oops. 1 second, I think. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you well.
Okay, sorry, my screen is kind of like freezing. It's kind of going crazy. 1 sec.
No worries. Yeah, anytime I try to do anything with Zoom with like something going on in the background, it just like is insanely slow.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. My computer just is going like it's kind of like lagging. That's really weird. Okay. All right, let's try this again. Cool. Could you see my screen?
I can now, yes.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Now share my screen. Oops, that's not the button I wanted to do. All right. Yeah, I don't. My computer is really lagging for some reason. I don't know what's going on. If it keeps doing this, I might have to change. But hopefully, you guys can hear me all right. Just let me know if you can't hear me, because like on my screen I'm lagging a little bit, but it seems like on yours maybe it's fine. Cool.
Oh no, as soon as you said that. I think for me it's actually cut off right now.
Same.
Oh no. Let's see if I can shoot
Is there
him.
a way that we could present his PowerPoint externally and he can see?
I wonder if one of us could, if he sends a slideshow to us, I guess it would be one of us like controlling it though. But he
Yeah,
could
that's what I'm thinking.
like next slide or something like that. Let me send him a message and see if we. So his computer had just restarted, but he'll be rejoining us shortly, inshallah. But I'll pitch that idea to him to see if that can help. Yeah, not sure if the updates were related to Mac or what exactly it was.
Should we admit him? I'm just kidding. Yeah, let's let him in.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, let me try this again. That was very, very weird. My computer's like tripping out for some reason.
For sure, yeah.
Okay, let's see. All right, second time's a charm.
Does it feel like it's going smoother?
I think a little bit, yeah. So hopefully that restart did it. Cool. So I'll try to kind of run through it a little quicker. I know we just lost some time there. So communicating with a high-level executive. I'll just skip this. So today's agenda is, a little bit about what is exactly networking and in particular with high-level execs. Then we're going to get into how do you actually contact or how do you actually identify where, the contacts of these high-level executives. Then we'll go into how you reach out to them. And finally, we'll end with how do you actually set up a conversation in a coffee chat and what do you talk to them about? And we'll end off with some questions. So one of these, my favorite quote to start off this presentation is by Reid Hoffman. He's actually the founder of LinkedIn, not the CEO anymore. But he says your network is the people who want to help you and you want to help them. And that's really powerful. And I think if you kind of take this as a mindset going into networking, you'll benefit a lot more because I know a lot of people, when they think of networking, they kind of think of, oh, I need to do this to get a job or I need to do this to get something. But in reality, it's like any other relationship in the sense that it really should be a two-way street. And as much as you may need help, you should also be willing to help others. And, and it shouldn't be the center of kind of your relationship with somebody is just getting things from them. Now, what specifically is networking? The more clear definition is that, even though, like I said, we network to advance ourselves professionally, networking is about human connection at its core. So you never want to really come off as if you're trying to make some sort of transaction, but more so that you're looking to learn about who they are as a person and try to build a relationship. And a prime example of this is, I'm actually going to hopefully become a digital nomad soon with this whole remote work lifestyle and kind of go travel and meet other people. And, when you go traveling, if you're living in a hostel or whatever it might be, and you connect with somebody, you're not really looking for something, right? You just want to learn about who they are, what's their story, what is their life like, how did they get to where they are, right? And in some sense, I feel like networking is most powerful when you kind of do the same thing as that. You try to take an approach of really learning about them and who they are, not simply, how do I get into this job or this company? Cool. Let's see. So the first topic of today is kind of how do you identify the contacts of high-level executives? And a lot of this content can be very similar to reaching out to somebody who's not a high-level executive, especially these mindset things and what networking really is. But in this specific workshop, I want to give you some tips and tricks to specifically reaching out to more high-level execs. So the first thing is, I spoke to Daniel, a recruiter at Atlassian, and he's now had over, 8 years of experience because this was a while ago that I connected with him. And he says, you want to be intentional about networking. At the end of the day, it's about outcome versus output. And what I think he means by that is at the end of the day, you can reach out to 50 different CEOs, but if they're all doing different things and you're not very intentional about why you want to connect with them, it's not going to, even one of those individuals may not be very powerful in your network. It may not be helpful to you and you may not be able to even really connect. So what you want to do is maybe even focus on a handful of people you really want to get to know. And you feel like you have a very similar story to them or you resonate a lot with their life. And that's why you want to connect. And if you can nurture even 5 relationships, 5 CEOs, and make a very powerful, deep, close relationship, that will go 100 miles, farther than trying to connect with 50 to 100 different high-level execs. And something I saw on LinkedIn once was go 100 miles deep and 10 miles wide, right? And a lot of people who are networking, they go 100 miles wide and only 10 miles deep, right? And so you want to try to go deeper if you can. So Specifically, we'll talk about 3 different ways you can identify contacts, and then one thing called chain connections, which is super, super powerful. So before I even start, obviously one thing that to keep in mind is whoever you do network with obviously can refer you to a job. They obviously can help you. And a lot of individuals do network, especially in professional careers, in hopes that one day if they ever need something, or maybe at that moment they need a job, they can ask for that help. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with this. I would never say that, you should never be able to ask for help or anything like that. Ultimately, again, like I said, networking is about who you can help and who people can help you. It's a two-way street. And I like this. I want to give you some stats here because it's important to remember how far networking goes compared to something like applying to a job, right? And the stat is that 7% of applicants had referrals when applying to a job, which is very, very low. But 40% of hired candidates had referrals. So if you think about it, you're obviously tenfold times more likely to get a job if you have some sort of connection or you're referred. Because the reason for this is not simply for the state of, oh, I got a referral. It's because somebody who's working at a company can vouch for you. And ultimately, companies who are trying to hire other people want to be as confident as possible that if they hire you, that you're going to be a good employee, that you're going to do a good job, and that you're going to add value to the company. Because it's obviously very expensive for companies to hire people. And if employees just keep leaving and their retention rates are very high or very low, it's bad for the company's business, and it's going to take an impact on the company overall, right? So referrals are a good way for people already in the company to say, hey, look, I know we're finding somebody, we're looking for somebody, I have somebody in mind that I have a good relationship with, and I can vouch for them, and I think they'd be a great fit in this company. And so that's why referrals ultimately go a very long way. Obviously, there's other things like, for example, you can get a bonus if you're in the company and you refer somebody and they get hired and things of that nature. So, and here are some other things like obviously if you get a referral, you get a higher pay usually, and also you're hired 3 weeks after the interview compared to 7 weeks by non-referred candidates. So, but why am I telling you all this, right? And it kind of goes again back to that mindset thing, which is regardless of whether you're trying to network to advance yourself professionally, it is ultimately about human connection at its core, right? And so just want you to keep that in mind. So the first thing you want to consider when you're reaching out to high-level executives is who you're reaching out to, right? The first thing you want to keep in mind is trying to find, like I said, 100 miles deep, finding people who have common connections to you. And I give an example of Berkeley here because Berkeley has I went to Berkeley, and I think many of the students here went to Berkeley, but it could be any school. Trying to find somebody who is an alumni of your school is a great first start, but really it's maybe like only 40 miles deep. It's not 100 miles deep because, well, obviously, as we know, Berkeley has, hundreds of thousands of alumni, and anywhere you walk around, I feel like in the Bay Area or any company, there probably is going to be a Berkeley grad somewhere, right? So it's not as like kind of like a feeling of, oh, I'm so like I relate to this person so much, because Berkeley is such a large campus. Now, it's completely different if you went to a small private school like Stanford or Harvard. And that's why often you see people who go to those Ivy Leagues that are very small in nature have like a direct access to their network, because there aren't many of them already as it is. And so when they meet somebody else who goes to those schools, it's like, oh, wow, you went to the same school as me. The second thing I want to keep in mind is when you're looking for high-level executives, that doesn't just mean a CEO. In fact, the CEO might be the worst person to reach out to unless you have a very specific reason to reach out to them, right? You want to, other roles that are in high-level executive positions are directors, vice presidents, GMs or general managers, and people who have the word chief in their role, chief product officer, chief human resource officer, whatever it might be. Now, obviously, like I said, again, it depends on what you're specifically looking to connect with them about. And the other thing to keep in mind is anybody who has these type of titles in their role will most likely have at least 10 years of experience. That's important to consider because most likely you're going to be wanting to connect with a high-level exec for 2 reasons. One, they are in a hiring position authority. These people are in hiring position authority. They have a lot of influence in the company. So if you're trying to get hired and you have a referral from somebody here, either their referral is going to go a long way, or sometimes even they're in such a high level role where they actually have the ability to budget you in and literally create a role for you if they see value. The second reason you might want to connect with a high level exec is to actually learn about their experiences and, more importantly, figure out if whatever path they've taken is the path you want to take, right? And what I mean by that is, I think oftentimes we only look maybe 2 to 3 years ahead of ourselves. We don't really, and sometimes, maybe the common interview question is, what do you want to be in 5 years? I would really ask yourself, what do you want to do in 10 years? Where do you want to be? And the reason why I ask that is not necessarily to gear your entire life around that, but to ask yourself that if you got to somewhere in 10 years, would you actually be happy there? And somebody who is in a director, VP, GM, or chief role most likely has gone through a lot of years of experience, and you can have direct insight into whether you see yourself in that type of role in the future, right? And that's really important to consider, especially as you go on in your professional career, and why you might go about actually reaching out to somebody in this type of role. All right, so those are the type of people you want to look for. Now, how do you find them? Well, the first one is through LinkedIn cold search, right? This is obviously super common. Most people know this. And I just want to go through some of the examples and then show you some examples. So LinkedIn cold search is one. Looking on the company, or if it's a school, you can look at the website and you can find them there. And sometimes their email may be listed or their number. And the final way is existing connections. And I'll get into that part a little bit later, but using your existing connections, it could be very powerful. Now, this last one also is determined a little bit by your upbringing. If you are coming from kind of a wealthier background, or, you're trying to get in, your parents are in that same industry, you're more likely to be able to use your existing connections, or your family connections, or your upbringing connections as a tool to connect with more high level execs, right? Like I met somebody at Berkeley Haas once, and she's like, yeah, my dad's, I was like, why don't you work for tech? And she's like, well, if I wanted a job, it's not very hard. My dad's like the chief something in like Salesforce. And I was like, well, that must be nice. But, obviously I don't come from that type of background, but some people do. And, there's nothing wrong with having that privilege. And if you do have that blessing or that privilege, I recommend you take advantage of it. And hopefully one day you can help other people as well. But there's nothing shame to use that privilege. And if you do have it, obviously that's a great way to connect with more high level execs. But if you don't have it, you're also not, disadvantaged, because you can connect still with those people. You just maybe have to put in a little bit extra effort and be a little bit more strategic. So some ways you can find these people and their specific contact, right? LinkedIn is just going to come up with their profile, and sometimes high level execs, in particular CEOs, they're not even really on like social media because they're so busy that maybe they have an account, but they're really not on there. They're not really using it frequently. But sometimes they are very active and they do visit their account often as well. And I'll give you an example. Years ago, I posted something about Microsoft on LinkedIn. And at that time I was working at Microsoft, I think, or maybe it was a little bit after I stopped working there. And that post that I posted got like a little bit of virality. And I'm not even joking with you. How LinkedIn, if you're on LinkedIn, it'll show you who viewed your profile. When I clicked on that, I literally saw Satya Nadella. And, if you're familiar with Microsoft, that's the new CEO. Well, he's not new anymore. He's been there for like 10 years, I guess. But he's the CEO of Microsoft. And that kind of surprised me. And, there's two reasons for this. One, I mentioned Microsoft. Two, the virality and algorithm of LinkedIn it's very easy to take one post. And if it's even semi-viral, you can have a mass amount of people look at your content. But what's most surprising about this story is that even somebody like Satya Nadella, who you would think does not have time for LinkedIn, or, doesn't use LinkedIn, or has some other thing going on is actually using LinkedIn, even if he doesn't post or whatever. And so you'd be surprised who actually uses LinkedIn. However, I would never contact a high-level exec through LinkedIn because it's kind of like a social media platform. It's like trying to reach out to an influencer on Instagram. The likelihood of you getting a response is probably very, very, very slim, right? And so I just use it to find them and see if I can find any information on their background and see how kind of active they are as well. And so as an example on this, let me stop sharing my screen. Oh, actually, continue sharing my screen, but exit out of, let's see. So here I have like chief product officer. I just typed it in and I went to people, and you have chief product officer of Masterclass, of LexisNexis. Like you have a lot of different types of people, and of course, the more smaller the company, the more likely you're going to be able to connect with them, and the more likely that they'll actually probably be active on LinkedIn as well. And so you have all sorts of people. Like Calendly is a very popular company or tool that a lot of people use, but people probably don't look for the chief product officer of Calendly very often unless they're in that industry and they specifically want to connect with them, right? But if I go to her link account, I can see I have one mutual connection, and I can see she has 2,000 followers, and she seems tiny bit active, and I can see a little bit about her past experience, where she worked and where she went to school and things like that. And that's going to be helpful to build rapport for your cold message, which we'll get into in a minute. There are other websites like Hunter.io and Clearbit. These definitely work. As an example, here's an email example I'll show you in a bit, but Clearbit, I can go here. It's a Google Chrome extension. Let's see if I can just quickly log in. Let's see. So find emails, and then I can go to, I don't know, any company like, let's say, Masterclass. And I can actually go by seniority, go to executive, and here are some of the executives working at Masterclass, right? Founder, CEO, here's his email, here's his Facebook, here's his Twitter. I can get all that information directly there, right? I can also, if I don't want to reach out to CEO and I want to get to maybe the VP of talent or engineering, I can go there. Here's his email, here's his LinkedIn, right? And it's legit. Here's his LinkedIn. If I click on it, VP of engineering, we're hiring. And, clearly this guy is active on LinkedIn as well, because he literally has a "we're hiring" kind of thing on his profile, which means that this is a perfect person to actually reach out to if you are looking for a job, right? Because this person is making it very clear that we're looking to hire. And so if that's something that you're looking to do by reaching out to high-level exec, you might, this is the type of person you might want to reach out to. All right, cool. So those are some examples. And of course, like I said, it's important to try to be as niche as possible, right? So when I go back here and I'm looking up an individual in particular, there is certain filters I can filter out, right? I can do first degree connections in the US, working at a specific company. A great way I do it is like, I'll actually look for high-level executives of a company I might be looking to apply for. So let's say I want to apply to Masterclass. I'll look for somebody who was a high-level exec at Masterclass in the past, and now they're somewhere else. The reason for this is because they're more likely to connect with you. And that's because since they don't work at the company, they know that you're not looking for a job referral or something like that, or trying to sell them something in the company. You're more likely to just learn about their experience at that company. And if you reach out to them in a certain way, like, hey, I'm really interested in this company, or I'm really interested in the edutech space, and I know that you previously worked at Masterclass, I'm interested in kind of learning a little bit more about your thoughts on the industry, they're probably more likely to connect with you since it's something in the past and they're already finished with something like that. Of course, there's school, and there's a bunch of other stuff. You can even put specific titles The other way is you can, go directly to the school that you graduated from or currently attending, and then you click on alumni, and then you type in whatever type of person you're looking for. So let's say I want to look for the chief, I don't know, financial officer of a company. Chief financial officer, right? These people, I didn't even know they're the CFO at UC Berkeley. You want to connect with the CFO at Berkeley or student at Berkeley? That's perfect, right? You probably even have his email already since you go to Berkeley. And so, obviously, there's a lot of people who will come up, and these are great people you can connect with because you already have one mutual commonality, which is you going to Berkeley and they did as well. And as an example, maybe we can even look at a specific person like this guy. Let's see. I have one shared connection with him. So let's see. He's CFO at Caspian. He previously worked at Goldman Sachs. Tourism manager. See, this is super interesting. This is a really good way to connect with somebody, right? I just told you I'm going to be going to become a digital nomad soon, right? Which means I'm basically working remotely from different places around the world. This guy is a tourism manager in Alaska, right? If I plan to go to Alaska, I can literally connect with this guy based on his past experience in Alaska, and then transition into more of a professional conversation around Caspian if that is what I had interest of, right? And here he's actually studying the same degree I'm literally studying. I didn't even know that. And that's another thing. So here's the other thing. If you actually got a master's degree anywhere, more easier to connect with them actually, because there's less people who are getting a master's in something. Especially if it's not an MBA, because I feel like MBAs are very, very popular and they're very common compared to like an MS or an MD or something like that. That's even more specific. So yeah, those are some examples of finding somebody on LinkedIn and then building rapport and commonality and figuring out how to reach out to them, right? Now I'm going to get into cold emailing in just a second, but I just want to go over some do's and don'ts, right? Austin is a director at Microsoft. He's an exec. He's considered probably an exec. Maybe not actually, because even at the director of Microsoft, there's so many employees that maybe he's not considered at the exec level. But at most companies, the director is an exec level. But either way, the point of this example is to try to stand out, right? When you're trying to reach out to somebody, you want to research them, write 5 interesting things, pick out one, and then put it in your message. And that's my general thumb of reaching out to anybody, including high-level execs. But the example I just gave you of Brock, I could write 5 really. I could talk about his master's degree. I could talk about his tourism role. I could talk about Goldman Sachs if I'm interested in the financial space, or I could talk about Caspian. And let's see if he has anything in his no, it's kind of more professional, but sometimes people also have information about their passions in their bio. And so you could try to connect there. And then obviously it's not just limited to LinkedIn. I could literally look this guy up and find more information on him and connect with him on those things, right? And so here's an example of a do where you actually introduce yourself. Actually, I won't give you this example because this is probably not the best way to reach out to high-level execs. Okay, so the third way to find and identify high-level execs contacts, right, is networking events. Now, obviously, we're in COVID, so it's a bit different, but it's actually in some ways more powerful right now because more people are available to do speaking engagements since everything is remote, which means people don't have to go out of their way or take time out for an event, and they're more likely to take a speaking gig or something of that nature because everything is virtual, right? So if you find a networking event, whether it's in person or not, because actually, at least at Berkeley, things are going back to normal in fall, and there will be events, and COVID is, I guess, reducing. So whether it's in person or not, you want to look for networking events. Now, these are events that are related to your industry. I'm not talking about look for literally events called networking. I mean, you could do that too. And there might be some at like that the alumni school at Berkeley offers, or whatever school you're going to, the alumni center will offer. But I'm talking about looking for events that are very specific to what you're interested in learning about, or very specific to you know, an area that you're interested in connecting with people on, right? So like if I wanted to learn about digital nomads, I would go to an event near me on digital nomads, right? Or if I wanted to learn specifically about the VR space, maybe I'm, you know, I think Ismail or I think Shams or somebody was just telling me about somebody who's creating an app at HalalHacks that is like kind of the AR of Qurans, right? Or an AR, like using AR to read the Quran, right? Maybe I want to connect with somebody who's deep in the AR space, so I would go to an AR event, right? I guess you guys get the point. But in essence, you want to find these events, check out the attendees, make sure you figure out exactly who you're looking to connect with, and have a solid reason as to why you want to connect with them. And then from there, during the event, you want to find your contact. And again, this is if it's in person. You want to smile. And the key is to sit in the second row, get there early, and always continue to make eye contact. Try to be as active as possible. Because at the end of the day, like I'll give you an example. I'm sure some of you have been to online events, online workshops. Even during HalalHacks, I'm sure you guys have been to workshops. How many people actually like raise their hand and ask something? If it's like a large workshop, right? If there was like 100 people in this workshop, I would say maybe 5 students would actually like speak up, right? Unless they're being graded on participation points, most people don't. But on the speaker's end, the person who's speaking in the workshop, it's going to go 100 miles if you actually are the one to speak up, because they want people to ask them questions. They want people to be engaged. They want people to, you know, whatever. Like even a better example, especially right now since events are online, most people have their cameras off. If you're like the only person out of 100 people with their camera on, I guarantee you're going to stand out. And that's going to make the person who's speaking be much more interested in speaking to you after the event or during the event as well, and actually connecting with them. Because out of 100 people, you're the only one who took the effort to put your camera on, right? So these are some of the strategies you want to use when you're looking for high-level execs at these networking events. And some other things you want to do is, you know, introduce yourself at the event, but don't take a lot of their time, because they probably have other people who do want to ask questions, especially like in-person events. Like there is a class called Newton's Method at Berkeley, where every single week they bring like some high-level exec to talk about some random topic, right? And depending on the person, there will be a lot of people afterwards who have questions, right? And so you want to, first of all, again, be in the front and not take too much of their time, because they have a lot of other people asking them questions. So, you know, ask engaging questions, maybe like one engaging question based on what they were talking about, or based on the prior research you already did. And then you want to ask them, if the question goes well and you feel like they answered it well and they are engaged well and you did your research, you want to actually get their email and say, hey, look, I know that you're really busy, and I know that there's a lot of other students here interested in speaking to you. I'd love if I could possibly get your email and, you know, connect with you on a 15-minute call to ask you more about X, Y, and Z, right? And the key here is to ask about learning, because people are more likely to be open to saying yes if you're interested in learning about something. And then follow up as soon as possible, because like I said, if you go to Newton's Method and you have 20 students standing in line to talk to somebody after the class is over, you may have, out of those 20 people, 10 people who ask for emails or try to connect with them on LinkedIn, whatever it might be, right? So as soon as the event's over or you walk away, email them as soon as possible, because high-level execs meet people all the time. They're constantly meeting people. Like literally one of their largest responsibilities is to meet with people. So they're going to forget who you are if you don't reach out really quickly. And what I would try to do is, whatever conversation you have, try to make it very unique in the sense that they very much remember you. Like, for example, let's say you're wearing a Star Wars shirt when you meet this high-level exec. I don't know, I'm just giving like a random example. You go to Newton's Method class, You're wearing a Star Wars shirt, and you meet this person. Try to tell the person as you're leaving, hey, I'm going to be the guy emailing you with the Star Wars shirt. Now, when you email him, you can, or her, or whoever it is, you can literally say, student with the Star Wars shirt. And it's very likely that the person will remember who you are, because that's such a unique thing that it's very unlikely they encountered somebody else who was wearing a Star Wars shirt, and then on top of that told him, I'm going to connect with you, and I'm the guy who has a Star Wars shirt, right? My favorite example is Larry Martin. He's like a high-level exec at Apple. He comes to the networking decal every semester, usually to give a workshop. And he gave this example. He everywhere he walks, every presentation he gives, he comes in with a Star Wars luggage bag. And like literally, he will like use that as a way for people to remember him. Like another example he gave me is like one time he was in an interview, and the interviewer asked him a fun fact, and he said, I can teach my grandmother what cloud computing is. And what he was trying to basically say is this very complex thing called cloud computing. For most people, it's very complex. He can literally teach it to his grandmother, and grandmother will know what it is. And now after the interview, he walks away, and literally his subject line will be interviewee who knows how to teach cloud computing to his grandmother. And like no doubt about it that that person will know who that person is, and they're going to remember you, right? It's leaving a lasting impression. Okay, so enough about lasting impressions, but I want to really solidify like how you're supposed to make an impression on a high level exec. And like I said, the key here is to try to be unique. So follow up, here's like a template. Thanks again for the opportunity to meet you. It was great learning about whatever it might have been, and it's more specific you can get, the better. And then ask him a question, whatever you're looking for from them, whether it's a 15-minute conversation, whether it's, I don't know, maybe they're an investor and you're trying to pitch them something, and that's a bit more appropriate if you're asking for something. Or maybe you're just looking to learn about their life because they said something that resonated with you and you want to connect on that specific thing. And that's going to probably go the longest way and the best. And so that's the key there. Here's an example. I connected with Susan Donovan. She's the director of product at Chegg. And she was at this event called Intern Palooza. It was like 2,000 people. And somehow, some way, I was able to connect with her. And then I followed up with an email, and I used the same template I just showed you. Intro, thanking her, my biggest takeaways, a follow-up request, and another thank you. And then here's her responding, right? So using these methods does work. I've used them in the past. My students have used them in the past, and they 100% do work. And then finally, but ask questions, nod, constantly nod. Like if you're in person and they see you and you're in the second row or the first row and you're nodding, they're gonna like naturally keep talking. Like when a public speaker is in the front of the stage, they usually are looking at like a certain group of people, like a few different people, and they make eye contact with those people. And the way they're able to make eye contact with those people is based on how much attention that individual is paying, right? Because they're not gonna look at somebody on their phone in the audience constantly. So if you nod, you're going to catch their attention, and they're probably going to keep speaking to you while the event's going on. And then they're more likely to talk to you after the event's over as well. And yeah, I guess like Rohil is an example, another example of a student of mine. We had like the PayPal CPO come to an event at Cal, and he really wanted to connect with her. And so he'd followed all these steps. He reached out, he'd researched who she was before, he reached out to her. Then during the event, he asked a question very specific to PayPal. And then after the event was over, he went up, he basically got her contact information, and he had a coffee chat, and he built a relationship with that person. And the last thing is finding networking and speaker events. You can do this by looking at department newsletters. You can ask your professor. I'm telling you, you'd be very surprised by how well connected your professors are, especially tenured professors or professors who are more higher level up at your school. I'll give you a very prime example. Richard Lyons was the former dean at the Haas School of Business, but before that, he was the chief learning officer at Goldman Sachs. and now he's the Chief Innovation and Entrepreneurship Officer at UC Berkeley. This guy is very well connected, not just because he worked at Goldman Sachs or because of his high level position, but actually because as the Dean of Haas School of Business, one of his main responsibilities is collecting donations, like really large donations. And if you know who Richard is, you know that like in the last 10 years, he's like been somebody who's able to attract the like 8 out of 10 of the largest donations ever given to Berkeley was because of Richard Lyons, right? So now you have to keep in mind, these donations are not like $5. They're like millions and millions of dollars. And every single one of those people who he's talking to is a very high level, net worth individual, high level exec. If they're going to be able to make a $300 million donation, you better bet they're probably a CEO of some company or some high level exec, right? And so you can, if you know who Rich is and you connect with Rich and you add value to his life or connect or build a relationship, and then you one day need help or are looking for something or am interested in something, and you reach out to Rich, it's very likely that he's going to have somebody in his network who he can connect you with, right? The second way to do this is applying to competitive programs, clubs, organizations, whatever it is, right? Berkeley has many of these, and sometimes the more competitive or sometimes the competitive ones have certain high-level execs who graduated from that club, right? And so this kind of goes back to building a relationship with somebody on a deeper level beyond Berkeley. Well, if you connect with a Berkeley alum who was also in, I don't know, the MSA. I mean, I don't know how competitive the MSA is to get on the board, but I'm sure it's competitive. And so if you connect with somebody who, if you're in the MSA and you're on the board, let's say Ismail's on the board and he's in the MSA and he connects with somebody else who's 10 years out who also was in the MSA, that's a high level exec, right? In fact, I noticed that there are some people who are speaking at HalalHacks who I would consider to be high level execs, right? High level network individuals. I'm sure a great way that the board connected with them was because the foundation of MSA or whatever kind of way you connected with them, right? And so that's another way to connect with them. Kleiner Perkins is a great example. It's very competitive to get into, but once you get in, like at Kleiner Perkins, every single week they have a CEO come in and give him a workshop. And Kleiner Perkins is already very selective and competitive. So now you're getting access to CEO of Figma and CEO of Slack and these high-level execs literally talking to a group of 20 to 30 people. And you can definitely connect with them much easier because it's a very special event. It's a catered event. And this high network individual, high-level exec is specifically coming to this event, which means that you're more likely to be able to connect with them. And the last one is obviously the normal Facebook, Meetup, LinkedIn, those type of websites. You can find events. But keep in mind, it will be harder to connect with them because they're more large scale and they're more public usually. All right, so I've talked a lot. Before I go on to anything else, I want to ask if anybody has any specific questions about anything. Oh yeah, Mohammed, can you have a question? You're raising your hand.
Yeah, I am. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Thanks for the presentation. So I had a question about one of the earlier parts where you were talking about like cold email or cold, I guess, LinkedIn messaging, and I guess connecting with them on a non-job basis, and then like trying to, I guess, transition the conversation if you're interested or looking for an opportunity to work at, say, their company or you leverage that connection. Do you think that sometimes may like give them a bad kind of, I guess, vibe or impression afterwards if they didn't know that you were like you started off like with the intention of like learning more about them or talking about something, and then you transition to something else. So like
yeah, so the key here is like there is like, so networking as a whole is ultimately about professionally helping other people. It is like networking. The term networking is like in the professional context, right? So if you connect with somebody through email, it is kind of professional, right? You're not really connecting with them on Instagram or Facebook. And so because of that, at the end of the day, if you're a student and you're trying to get somewhere, everybody kind of knows that, you may ask for help. Like if you're reaching out to a professional in the industry, you're seeking some sort of help in any case. Even if you're looking just to build a relationship with them, you are still seeking to build a relationship in the sense of learning about their career journey. And by the way, when I say like building a relationship with them, your first meeting should be more professional. I would say it's very hard if you started talking about like, tell me about your kids and your family. Like it might be a little awkward, right? So your first connection, and I'm going to get into the coffee chats in a bit, the questions you may gear towards will probably be a little bit more professional. However, you can turn those conversations into something that is not necessarily professional. Like, for example, I have a friend, his name is Hassan. He wanted to work at a company once. He went to the company's headquarters, went to the back of the warehouse and saw some guy smoking. And that guy who was smoking ended up being like the director of marketing at the company. And he's like, hey, and he just started chatting it up. And then he started talking about, and this company was called Lucid Motors. And he was just, talking about like Lucid and how it's competing against Tesla. And then he transitioned into, this is super interesting. I'm a student at UC Berkeley, and I'm actually really interested in the, the software of automobile space. And, I was wondering, does Lucid have any opportunities open? And that guy was literally like, sure, let me see if you have your resume on you, I can try to take a look and pass it on, or see if I can connect you with somebody. And so you see the connection went from like professionally just building a relationship around Lucid and the automobile space in the industry to, hey, I'm actually also in the kind of in the realms of looking for a job or growing my professional career. I was wondering if you have any opportunities, right? And I don't think like if you ask it that way, it's gonna come off as like, oh, this guy is just using me. Like at the end of the day, people want to help other people, and you should want to help other people, and you yourself should try to help other people. And what you have to keep in mind, the most important thing is, at one point in time, the high level exec you're reaching out to was also in your shoes. They were also a student. They were also somebody who needed help, who needed to get a job, who needed to apply, who needed to network. And they also at one point in time probably had to ask somebody, hey, could you give me a referral? Hey, could you connect with me? Hey, could you connect somebody else with me? And so it's kind of the nature of professionalism to just like know this as like a standard. What I'm talking about as like, you don't want to make it as a transaction is literally like reaching out to high level execs and saying like, do you have a job? Right? Unless you already know them or something, or actually, and even that, in that case, you could actually even do it that way. Actually, you definitely can. And I've even done that because at least you're giving a straightforward shot to them. But what I would say is like, what's weird is if you like said, hey, I'm interested in learning about like, like I'm interested in learning about like tourism. And then like, let's say I reached out to Brock and I was like, I'm really interested in learning about tourism. I know you're a tourism manager. I'm going to be a digital nomad soon. And then within the first 5 minutes, I'm like, hey, so actually, I just wanted to let you know also, I really need a job right now. And I was wondering if your company Caspian has any opportunities, right? It's like the guy is going to realize, oh, I realized what this really was about very soon. Right. And he's less likely to be like, okay, I want to help you, right? Whereas if you're easing into a conversation, it's a little bit more like, okay, you're kind of, it's really what easing the conversation about is not like acting sus and doing it in an underway. It's about building trust. It's about like making the person feel comfortable and understanding of who you are and building like that trusting relationship so that if you do need help, they're more likely to be like, okay, like I know who you are now. I'm more than happy to help you. And that's kind of the approach I would take it. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for being so thorough with that answer as well. Appreciate it.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, of course. Sweet. So I know we only have 5 minutes, so let me try to get rush through the rest, and then I'll take questions, and I can stay a little bit over as well if individuals have questions. So let's see. So yeah, kind of just go to any event you can go to. If you have time, and I would really go to any event as possible, because like 80% of success is just showing up, and you never know who you're gonna meet, right? So that kind of flows into chain connections, which is basically additional connections you can make from the people you're already connected with, right? And that's why I said, if you don't grow up in a really like wealthy background, or somebody who's really connected already, or parents who are in the same industry you're working for, it's okay, because you can connect with one person, and that person can connect you with 3 more people, and those 3 people can connect you with 3 more people, right? And so it's literally like an exponential graph. And the point is here is like, you can connect with one person, and they already have a very established network that you can ask them to connect you with more people. And so you're growing your network that way. Here's an example. Dr. Kuhn was the president of a community college that I went to. And while I was in student government, I connected with Dr. Kuhn. We had multiple meetings, but towards the end of my meetings, I started asking him about how I'm transferring to Berkeley and how I'm looking for a job. And he kind of became a mentor. And that's when I started asking him more about jobs and opportunities. And he decided to connect with people. He connected me with this person who was not a high-level exec, but she connected me with Bill, who was a very high-level exec at Microsoft. And that's how I got my job at Microsoft, right? He also connected me with Megan, who is not necessarily a high-level exec, but she knew Kim, who is the CEO of a company. She knew Mark, who is the chief financial officer of a big tech company. Funny enough, literally, I met Mark in 2015, and he's the chief CFO of New Relic, and like here I am today working for New Relic. And I didn't even get the job because of Mark, but it's just crazy how I ended up working for a company where I met the CFO 5 years ago from somebody else, and I wouldn't even known what New Relic was if it wasn't for Mark. And so you gonna get these like, and then Kim connected me with Graham, and Graham was an executive at Goldman Sachs, and so it's all these people who have or open to helping you connect with even more people. And even though I only connected with one person, Dr. Kuhn, I got all these other connections. And that's what chain connections are. So when you're writing cold messages, I like to say, I came up with this, it's not even really a quote, it's just like a saying, but the best thing that can happen to you if you ask for something is get a yes. And the worst thing is that you can live a life of regret. And I like this statement because it's like, literally you have nothing to lose to try to reach out to somebody through cold email. Even if they don't respond, they don't know who you are. You're a complete stranger most likely, and you'll probably never meet them again, and they might not even know how you look like. So reaching out, the worst thing is that they're not going to respond. The best thing is they're going to respond. You're going to build a connection. So there's a lot of ways you can connect, but let me just get to kind of the high level exact way. And I'll share this deck with you guys so you can kind of look over it. These slides, just when you look over it, because I know we're short on time here, are going to be focused more on like connecting with directors and VPs. And I also have an example here. And then here's a chain connection email if you're looking to connect through a chain connection. So let's say Ismail knows somebody or Shams knows somebody. Let's say if Shams knows Ismail and I want to connect with Ismail, I can use this template with Shams to connect with Ismail in essence. And these templates are just a guidance. They're not like you have to do exactly them. They're just like a guidance on professionalism and how you might write an email. Because I know a lot of folks kind of get confused on like what to exactly write or what not to write and things like that. So that's why I've kind of included them here. And then here's some stats on cold email and why it's like not the end of the world if you don't get a response, because it's very hard to get a response, but also how following up is super important. So you always want to follow up, and I have some tips here: waiting at least 3 days, downloading an extension called Streak, which lets you see if they've seen your email. This allows you to determine whether the person's just busy or they just never saw your email. And following up is critical to getting a response because professionals are really busy. Like I follow this guy named Juan Solting on LinkedIn. Maybe some of you've heard of him. And he just posted something recently. He said, I haven't been on. This guy is super active on LinkedIn. He always responds to people. He tries responding to everybody, and he's like, I haven't responded to anybody in 2 weeks. The reason is because I got in a car accident, right? And so sometimes people are not going to respond to you because they also have a life and think life can happen. It doesn't necessarily mean that they don't want to talk to you or they're not interested in helping. In fact, I would say 90% of the time they want to help. They're probably just busy or they forgot or something, or maybe they didn't see your email or something. And here's a third, there's also a way you can call them. And I have a template here where you can call them, and some tips on how you can actually call them as well. And I've had a prior student do this. This is best if you're reaching out to a very small company like private equity firms, venture capital firms, law firms. These are type of like usually smaller LLCs or corps, where it's easier to get in touch with the person. It's very unlikely you're going to call Microsoft in SF and somehow get to Satya Nadella on the phone. That's probably not likely. So these are for smaller companies. And then, here's the main template that for CEOs and anybody who has a chief financial officer, chief exec are very, very busy people. So this is the email I use, and I think it's worked pretty well. It's called the 60. Basically, it's very quick and straightforward. I just call it the 60-second email, and that's kind of the outline. And then here's the template. You just say, dear Shams, I know you're really busy and that you get a lot of emails, so this will only take 60 seconds to read. This establishes a level of professionalism and telling this high-level exec, hey, I know you got no time, but just give me a minute of your time, and that's all it'll take, right? Then you tell them a little bit about who you are. Highly recommend you use student because everybody likes students. Everybody wants to help students. And generally, students are not trying to sell you something or pitch you something. They're looking to learn from you or they're looking to grow from you. And so establish your credibility by saying, hey, I'm a student at UC Berkeley. I'm studying data science, and I'm really looking forward to learning more about your career journey as the chief data science officer of X company, right? And then I would always ask one very specific question, and I would try to ask this question in a way where you can't just find the answer online, right? If I don't know what a good example is. I can't think of something on the top of my head, but don't ask something that you can just look up on Google and find an answer to. Try to ask something that is pretty specific. And a great way to also reach out to, let's say you want a job and you reach out to a high-level exec and you just straight up tell them, hey, I'm looking for a job in X, Y, and Z, and that's your question. They may say, hey, I'm not really recruiting, but or they may say, sure, speak to X, Y, and Z, and they'll be able to connect you or something like that, right? And now you can reach out to that person who's under the CEO and say, hey, the CEO just told me to reach out to you for a job. I wanted to connect with you, right? And if it's coming from the CEO, it's going to be a more worthwhile, the person who's at the end receiving the email is going to take it a lot more seriously. So these are just some small strategies and tips you can use. And I really like the last line, which is, I totally understand if you're too busy to respond, but even a 1 or 2 reply would really make my day, right? You're basically telling him, don't have to give me a paragraph, don't have to take a lot of time, just kind of help me out a little bit, right? Here's an example. This person is an instructor at Stanford. She's also a CEO and has her own book. I wanted to reach out to her for my own startup on how to create a name for my startup. And she charges $10,000 for an hour consulting session. And I wasn't going to pay 10K. So I had my co-founder reach out to her, use this template. And then she responded saying, congrats. And she's like, and here's the thing, right? High-level execs want something in return. Relationships, like I said, are a two-way street. She said, if you're willing to write a review on a book if you're willing to write a review on my book on Amazon, I'd be happy to jump on a call and give you personal advice for free. So I took, and by the way, she even sent me a PDF of the book for free. So I didn't even have to pay for the book. And so yeah, I got a consulting session with her for free. All I had to do was write a review on her book for her. And so it's a two-way street. Another example is I wanted to work at Glassdoor a few years ago, and I had reached out to so many people in this company because I was so interested in working here. And here's an example if I could find it. Or actually, it's probably attached. I reached out to Robert, and Robert had just stepped down from CEO to chairman, and I knew that he's more likely to respond to my email. So actually, here's an example, and the same thing happened, and I'll show you an example in a second. But here's Robert. I knew that since he stepped down, he's more likely to respond. And I wanted to ask him a question. I said, I know you were the founder of Glassdoor and have accomplished so much in changing the industry. So I just want to ask you one question. What is the best way a university student can stand out when applying the Glassdoor's internship program? And pretty much he responded saying, emailing the founder doesn't hurt. What type of work do you want to do this summer? And I said, I'm so happy to hear from you. And then I told him a little bit about how I grew up in Marin County, where their headquarters are, and what type of internship I'm looking for. And then he said, great, I'll make sure this gets in the right hands. Nice to meet you. And yes, I did go through the interview and I went to the last step and I even got an offer. Never worked for them, but it does work, right? And it does happen and people do respond, right? Another example I have is Jeff Wiener. He was after Robert Hoffman, he was the next CEO of LinkedIn. So I reached out to him and I asked him the same question. I said, as the CEO and incoming chairman, what is the best way I can stand out for the full-time APM program this fall? He never responded, but I have Streak, and you can see he looked at my email in Sunnyvale on March 19th, on Santa Clara on March 19th. Then he looked at it again in Lake Tahoe on the 19th. Crazy how like he looked at all these places in completely different locations. But or actually this Lake Tahoe may have been me or something like that, and he might have been the other ones. But he looked at it and he never responded, which sucks, but I know he looked at it. So then I followed up with an email because that's the key here, right? And I reached out again and I kind of did the follow-up email template. And I got Tomer, who is, I think, the VP of product management at LinkedIn. And he was like, hey, let me connect you with the senior recruiter for the APM program at LinkedIn, right? And so Tomer obviously reached out because Jeff Wiener probably sent him my email. He forwarded him my email. So sometimes you may not get a response, but hey, sometimes you could still get a way of reaching out to them. Some last advice is just, keep it short, formatting, skip between lines, use a few exclamation marks in the email to kind of come off as more, I guess, just exciting or some form of expression. And then make sure you also have an email signature in case they want to kind of basically look for you. And the last example I have is also like my friend here, Manuel. He wanted to reach out to a company. Let's see. I gave him the advice. He said he did the call method. He got his first 15-minute call at Formula One because that's where he wanted to work. Not with the high-level exec, but just somebody in the company. And then he basically said, I actually did 6 calls with different people working on Formula One. This is his dream company. Then he said 2 days ago, I did a call with the CEO of Formula Management Group. So he used his chain connections to get to the CEO of Formula One. And then he got on a call with Formula One. He said, we were supposed to talk for 15 minutes. We ended up talking for 2 hours. And at the end, he said, I like you. Would you like to do a 6-month internship with me? So it was the best day of my life. This is his dream company, right? So, and then he talked about like all the things he's learning and stuff. So long story short, it does work. It may not work all the time, but here's the key. Formula One was his dream company. I guarantee you he's done a lot of research on Formula One. And that's why he was able to create a 15-minute conversation and turn it into 2 hours with the CEO and then get an internship after. And that's, again, kind of going back to the mindset of 100 miles deep, 15 miles wide, in the essence of trying to establish connections and be very intentional about how you go about it and who you're connecting with and why you're connecting with them. And of course, doing your background research. All right, I know I'm already 9 minutes over, so Ismail or Shams, you guys can let me know. There's still a lot on coffee chats and I guess wasn't able to get to it. I can still go over it if people have time and want to stay, but I guess also want to open it up to questions, and if people have to go, I want to be respectful of their time as well. Do you guys have any thoughts, or does anybody have questions?
Yeah, I know for me myself, like First of all, thank you so much for everything that you've presented so far. This has been an amazing talk, and I think I'm learning so much from it. It's crazy to see. I think some CFOF mentioned in the chat as well that there's like certain things that we've heard some of it before, but to hear it like formally, like chain connections, a lot of these other things, like it's just crazy to see. And we like a lot of these tips are what we use, get speakers for this event as well, and like just to communicate with other people, and a lot of us have used in the past. But you went into such great depth on them. And I think it's just you did a stellar job. Uh, I personally would love to hear more. I think maybe a few folks would be willing to stay a little bit longer, but I would say it could be a good time to have people ask questions now,
Mhm.
just in case they do need to drop off.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. I think Sohaib has a question.
Hello. I just had a question about basically, well, I kind of joined, but I just had a quick question about uh, having cold emails to actually get entry-level jobs. So currently, I do not have an internship at the moment, and I'm heading to be a senior year at my university. So I'm planning on applying for entry-level jobs right now, and I have some research experience, but I'm not sure basically how would cold emails help if I don't have to get to companies if I don't have without any internship experience. Is that possible?
Yeah. So that's a great question, and I think that there is so much content I wasn't able to cover, and this is obviously tailored more towards high level executives in some sense. And even though a lot of these tips can be used on regular individuals as well who are not high level execs, I couldn't get to kind of maybe somebody in your position, and maybe that's actually important to also clarify, is if you're reaching out to high level exec in many, actually I think I may have mentioned in the beginning, yeah, like you want to have some establishment in that industry. You want to know kind of a little bit about what you're talking about in that industry, have maybe some experience. Unless you're purely looking to reach out to them to figure out if you can see yourself in those shoes 10 years from now. Like if you're purely reaching out to a high level exec for the purpose of trying to understand whether or not you can see yourself as a chief financial officer of a company. Like maybe you are going into investment banking and you want to know, am I gonna, like if I go down this path and I become the chief financial officer of a tech company in the future, am I gonna like it? Right? You can't, and that anybody can reach out to at any stage, because it's purely a trying to understand that person's career and the position they're in, and only they can answer that question because they're in that position. You can't ask an investment banker, hey, what is it like being a CFO of a company, right? You have to probably talk to a CFO to figure out if that's what you see yourself doing in 10 years. In your shoes, if you don't have an internship, what I would try to do is connecting with people who have just recently graduated and people who got into roles that you're looking to get into. Maybe it's software engineering. I guess maybe let me ask you, what roles are you applying for? And you said you were a senior, you have some research experience. Is that research experience also similar to, I guess, a regular or similar to the field you're applying for?
Kind of. So I am doing research involving analyzing data for COVID, which requires Python, a programming language to analyze the data. So is that something that's kind of like a data analyst, and also and other than that, I am planning on doing some projects I have done a project recently in my software lab course during this past spring semester. So and I'm planning on doing more of these projects so that I can have some kind of credibility on my resume.
Okay, and you're applying for data science roles, data analyst, software engineering?
Software engineering.
Software engineering. Okay. So, I mean, I was definitely, I think everybody's been in your shoes at one point or another, and some people on this call may be as well. And I remember when I was in your shoes, the way I did it was I came to Berkeley, and when I transferred to Berkeley from community college, and I remember just applying for product manager roles. I had good like leadership. I had like it kind of goes to his backstory, which is like, for me, I came from more of an underrepresented background and was told, okay, in order to get a job, in order to get my dream job at Google, at that time it was like Google, just because it was Google. I said, okay, I need to go at it. I would need to work at a big company and to have some leadership, and I need to go to a big school. And when I got into Berkeley, I had Microsoft on my resume. I was student government president, and I was going to Berkeley. And finally, in community college, I applied to all these jobs. I got rejected because I was in community college. And when I got into Berkeley, I finally said, oh, finally, I'm in Berkeley. I'm going to get these jobs now. And then I applied everywhere for product management because that's what I wanted to do. And I got rejected from everywhere. And one reason was I didn't have product management experience, but I was still upset because I applied to companies that like nobody's ever heard of, to companies that were like Google. And maybe, I had too high expectations, but I thought I'd land at least one role, even if it was at a very small company nobody's ever heard of, despite my lack of product experience, because it was very hard to get product management experience. In your shoes, you even already have some experience and you're doing things that are related to software engineering. And what I would say is, in order to grow, especially if you want to work at the higher tech companies, unfortunately, a lot of it is based on your credibility of working at another big company. Now, the way to go around this is to network, is to connect with people, establish trust, establish credibility with people at bigger companies who can vouch for you, even though you may not have a big company on your resume, right? And I was talking to a recruiter, and she said, unfortunately, that's just how it is. Like, if we look at a resume and we look at it for 7 seconds, and we see, Harvard on one resume with Google and Facebook internships, and another student, and they don't have big companies, and they have, even though they have experience, they have companies that maybe they're not familiar with, their brain is automatically just going to go Harvard, Google, Facebook, and just pick that person, because they're not only looking at their resume for 7 seconds on average. And so the way to go around all of this is keep doing what you're doing. While you're doing it, connect with industry professionals at companies in software engineering that you want to work for. And the way I would go about connecting with them is, when you're writing an email, say, hi, my name is Sohaib. I am a student at UC Berkeley studying, I think it was computer science, studying computer science. And I'm looking to eventually graduate and pursue a software engineering role in the tech industry. And then the second line could be, I was scrolling through LinkedIn, and I came across your profile and noticed that whatever commonality you have, we both went to UC Berkeley, we both studied computer science, and you're at Tesla, which also happens to be my dream company. And then your third sentence could be something along the lines of, I know this is quite out of the blue, but as an aspiring software engineer, I would really love to connect with you and learn a little bit more about your career journey, but also get your take on a specific data science project I'm working on. And why did I add that second part? Because when you get on this call now, not only can you ask them questions about their career journey, you can also ask them questions about skills and certifications and things that they think would be helpful for you to attain to eventually get into, in this example, I use Tesla. So to get to Tesla as a software engineer. And the final thing you can do is, because you're already doing software engineering work, but maybe you don't feel like it has that credibility to get into whatever Tesla or whatever it might be, you can show them your project in that informational coffee chat. And that is also a way to establish credibility, because if that Tesla software engineer sees that project and says, oh, this is super interesting, you're working on this data analysis for COVID, this looks really cool. Maybe they can give you some advice on it, or maybe they can just look at it and learn about it. And you can show them like what you're doing and try to get advice from them. Now, what you can do is go back, use the advice. And so this is exactly what I did is after I connected with a lot of people for 6 months, after I connected with a bunch of PMs, all I did was do everything they asked me to do. I took the right product management courses. I decided to build my own project from start to finish because that's what they told me I should do to get experience. I looked into books. I looked into courses, online courses that were not even at Berkeley. I did everything they asked me to do. And I grew my product management experience. And then at the end of 6 months, well, actually throughout the 6 months, I was maintaining my relationship with each individual person. And that's a whole nother topic as well. But I was maintaining it, whether it was through sending them an article that I think would be interesting, updating them on my progress on a project maybe I talked about with them, asking them another question every month just to keep the conversation flowing, like a question for advice. And then at the end of 6 months, now I had built a pretty strong relationship. I had connected with them. I got their advice. They saw a little bit about my project. I had kept asking them questions. I kept communicating with them for 6 months. And at the 6 month mark, now I was ready to apply for jobs. And this was like around January or December, and internships are in summer. And I would say, hey, after 6 months, I would say, hey, how are you? General kind of introduction. I want to give you an update and say, I just finished my second semester at Berkeley or my first semester at Berkeley. And I took all the advice you gave me 6 months ago on product management, or in your case, it'd be software engineering. I took all the advice you gave me on software engineering. And here's what I did with my project. I just finished my COVID project, and here's how far we got. And you can say, I'd love to get another call and hear a little bit about your thoughts on the future of where we can take this project. Or you can say, now at that point, if you're looking for a job, you can say, now that I'm finished with this project, I was wondering if you knew of any opportunities at Tesla in software engineering on your team that I might be able to apply for. Now, again, the key here is, what did you do? You establish a relationship. Even though you may have not had a big company or resume, you built your trust by telling him about what you're working on, showing him your skills, and executing on the advice they give you. And that automatically builds trust. I'm now a working professional in the tech industry. If somebody comes to me and says, what should I do as a product manager? And then they go do that thing, and then they come back to me and they say, hey, I did exactly what you asked me for. I'm going to be quite impressed, because most people, they never execute. They don't take action. They listen, they want things, but they don't do the action that it actually takes. And so if you can prove that you did the action and you can showcase it, you've automatically established credibility and the respect of whoever that individual may have been. And this doesn't even matter if it's a high level exec or somebody who just graduated recently. In both scenarios, you'd be able to be successful. And that's when you can now basically ask for a job or a referral, and you're much more likely to also get an offer in that company. So does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it's a lot, but I guess the gist of the message is, if it's a high level exec or a recent graduate, basically connect with them over LinkedIn, over the template that you mentioned earlier, and essentially talk to them about the projects that you're currently working on, and then basically ask them for advice. Ask them for any advice that you could give them, and then follow that advice. And then after a certain period of time, ask them for any opportunities. That's
exactly how it is. And just a quick thing there: try not to connect on LinkedIn. Try to connect through email if you can, because more people will look on email over LinkedIn.
Okay, so how to get the email address of the?
Oh, I see. Yeah, you mentioned you were not here in the beginning. The key. So I'll be sharing the slide deck, but there was a whole kind of part of this lecture that was how actually you identify contacts. and there was different ways through, I gave some websites you can use to get their email and where to specifically look, and how to find them as well. So maybe you want to look at the presentation after, and then if you have questions, you can definitely reach out and I can guide you more or answer that question in particular as well.
Okay. Yeah.